Welcome to the Badaboom podcast. On this episode, Chris and I talk about Werewolf by Night, a special inspired by horror films of the 1930s and 40s that explores a new corner of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Listen in to hear our thoughts. Hey, what's up?
What's up?
We just got off of our Comic-Con high weekend at New York Comic Con, and it was easy to forget, but Werewolf by Night came out the Friday of Comic Con. And I realized when I got home, I was like, oh, this is out. And I've got to watch it now, even though I've been walking around all day and I'm super tired. It's the perfect thing to end my day with, watching it at night, turn up the volume, and get that kind of scary, kind of October vibe going.
Yeah, it may have been easy for you to forget, but I did not forget. I was really looking forward to it, and it's probably the best Marvel project in a while. Like in terms of like the way it made me feel, like exciting and how different in a lot of ways it felt. But shout out to them for creating this unique format to allow the team, Michael Giacchino and the creators, to kind of have a platform where they can create something that's almost feels outside of the MCU, and also something unique in terms of like the way they shot it, the music, the sound design. All those things were so refreshing. I think what's great about Marvel and Kevin Feige as a producer is like just when you think you're out, they find something to pull you back in. And Werewolf by Night is very much that.
Yeah, speaking of just like how they shot it and the format, before we dive more into like the episode or the movie itself, I think this really proves for Marvel that you don't have to do a Disney Plus series or a huge like movie rollout for something you want to make. You can make these hour and a half long movies that, don't have a whole bunch of actors in them, but have great quality production and are telling a great story to provide a lot of background content for certain characters, and we're going to eat them up on Disney Plus.
Everything does not have to be a 6-hour movie. And that's what these, Disney Plus shows have become. They've become basically, hey, we would love to make something about this character. It's like, all right, we probably have an idea for a movie, but how do we turn that into a series? And that's definitely hurt the quality of some of those shows. I think, things like Loki, Hawkeye were really solid, but things like Falcon and the Winter Soldier, what else? Some things are so forgettable. Moonlight,
Moon
those
Knight.
things, they felt like, hey, like it felt like you had like an hour of like really strong ideas, and the rest was just like, hey, it's like trying to hit the word count on your essay.
Yeah.
They're just putting a bunch of things in there, and you're like, hey, I don't really think you needed that. But this is refreshing, pulling it back to Werewolf by Night, which we're talking about. And I think it needs to be talked about because it's so good. They found a way to create something fun, unique, that's a callback to classic horror movies, but also it does, like, even though it feels outside the MCU, it does have that little bit of humor. There's something that does attach it. There are some jokes where you're like, oh, this would only happen in a Marvel movie. So there is a bit of that, and you need that because that's how you get people to tune into something like Werewolf by Night. But it was great. I love the performances. I love the cinematography. I love the sound design. I told you this, like a really good tip. If you have an Apple TV, hook up your AirPods because it is such a great sound experience. Particularly, it's directed by one of the greatest composers of our generation. So, of course, the sound is great. The music, the sound effects, it's just great. I loved like the part where there's a transformation, like the transformation part, you don't get to see it, you're seeing it through like Elsa Bloodstone's reaction to it, and I thought that was amazing. That's a scene that's going to go down in Marvel history.
That's like totally the style of like those old horror movies where like they're like, we don't have the CGI effects, so we're gonna make sure you are imagining what's happening. And like that's also just why the sound design and like the score is so good, because that's what's really bringing parts of this movie to life.
Yeah, and Gael Garcia Bernal as Jack Russell was really good, especially in the beginning because for that first like 10-15 minutes, which is a long time in this because it's only an hour. He doesn't really say much, and he really sort of portrays that that old movie star that has that mystery to him, and it definitely plays to it. But by the time he starts speaking, you're like, oh, this is a Marvel hero. The jokes. We get an appearance by Man Thing, which I thought from the trailers and the amount of time that they had that they'd only be in it for a little bit, but they're a huge part of the story. Also appear in it, like there is some moments where you're like, oh shit, they did, hold back some surprises and stuff. So it definitely gets me excited for the monster verse of the MCU. Like I think it can live in its own little corner. And, Marvel has so many different areas now. They have the cosmic, they have obviously now the horror elements, they have magic, they have science. So it's cool seeing like the MCU building out its world, because before it was very focused on several characters like Iron Man, like the main Avengers. And now it feels like, hey, there's a world where the blip is not discussed all the time. There's a world where people are like in the case of Miss Marvel, live in New Jersey. Who would have thought New Jersey exists in the MCU? Things like that. So these are the kind of projects that again bring you back in, where it reminds you like, hey, like we live in a great time where yes, like some of these things can be better, but we just gotta like a black and white Werewolf by Night Halloween special. Like how like how awesome is that?
Yeah, it was really good overall. Like you said, like the Marvel humor really kind of like is sprinkled throughout, but also is what really enhances it. But I think overall, like the sound design and like the parts were like, oh, this is where I would probably be scared if I was a kid watching this. And like, this is my first like horror movie. Those are my like favorite parts, like the transformation and like the intense little fight scenes they have here and there. Those are the parts where I'm like, all right, this is exactly what I would have wanted as a kid watching a horror movie. And getting to have that little happy ending part where everything turns into color at the end, where we have like the resolution, and also the fact that like we just randomly are calling Man Thing Ted throughout it.
Man.
Also, I used to be really scared of horror movies as a kid, so like those have been the moments where I'm like, oh, okay, this isn't that scary. But overall, like this is a great way to develop that monster verse, and I think even more so now than ever, as Marvel is building out the monsterverse and different parts of the MCU, it just very much shows that there's something for everyone in the MCU and also in the comics. It's just trying to expose those parts of the MCU and the comics to the right audience so they know, oh, that is for me. I want to buy into this. I want to invest in this and see all these cool things that have been created for all these years.
Yeah, and it gives, hopefully the streaming numbers reflect it. It gives them a platform to be like, hey, there are characters in the Marvel universe that maybe we can introduce in this way versus like a cameo in another movie or a 6-hour Disney Plus show. There's a way to have something like this. And it also gives directors a little more freedom, to chase something or explore an idea that may not be exactly like Werewolf by Night in this format. When black and white, you have a director who has not directed many things, but has been a part of huge productions and is one of the greatest composers we have. But to give them a chance to showcase their talent and go in different directions, I think this is probably one of the few Marvel projects recently where you feel like there's a vision, you can see what the filmmaker is trying to say versus like, oh, like I feel like I'm just watching like a machine, blurt out something. It's
Yeah.
like, hey, it has to hit these notes. It was cool. There's no end credit scene with like Blade showing up and being like, I'd like to talk to you about the Avengers or anything like that. It's just, or in this case, I'd like to talk to you about the Midnight Suns. But it's just like very much like, hey, this is the story. If we never see Elsa Bloodstone, Jack Russell, or Man Thing again, I wouldn't be upset. This was amazing. This was great. And no one has to say those things again. Like, even with their history, I wasn't watching this and being like, oh, is Moon Knight going to show up? Like, I was just enjoying it for what it was.
I was a little bit thinking Moon Knight was going to show up here or there because we had talked about how this is one of his first appearances is it in a like a Man Thing comic or the Werewolf by Night comic?
No, Werewolf by Night 32 is Moon Knight's first appearance. And there's an iconic fight between them. There's obviously also they have butt heads in other series, even in Moon Knight series. So they have a history. And obviously when your first appearance is somewhere, you're like, all right, like maybe that. But I think again, what's great about this is just very much about this story, this particular moment in time, not the past, not the future. Even when Jack is talking about their transformation, they're not giving you too much exposition as to how they turned into a werewolf or circumstances. It's like, hey, once a month, I have to lock myself in. And that's
Yeah.
that's all they say. There's nothing more like, hey, there's no flashbacks. It's about this moment in time.
Yeah, which I think for a long time we've tried to see a lot of the MCU try to connect itself through as many ways possible, through as much content as possible. And this didn't do that. Like you said, it's a very singular thing. You're there in the moment, experiencing it kind of like as those characters are experiencing it. There's nothing in the future you're looking forward to. There's no real Easter eggs. You're like, oh, I can't wait to see if Moon Knight shows up. You're just focused on the actual story. And it's just a great movie for the time of the year. It's a great little Halloween movie for the MCU and the MCU fans.
Yeah, it's get ready for spooky season.
Yeah.
All right. So one last thing. So like being with they have this new format, the special presentation or the holiday special. And we'll see it again with the Guardians Christmas special, which should be
Mm.
fun. Is there a character or part of the Marvel universe you would like to see in a special presentation?
I'm only saying this because we've seen some of these characters show up recently, and I want to know what the plans are for them. But we've recently got Daredevil in the She Hulk series. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen it yet, go watch it. But
I mean, but he's in every trailer for it, so
yeah, that's
it's not
that's
really
fair.
a
There's
spoiler.
no spoiler alert there.
Marvel spoiled it for you.
Yeah. But I'm a big fan of the She-Hulk, the Hulk family. So if there's something that expands upon that, through like a Hulk Christmas family thing or like a family reunion, because there are a lot of like Bruce Banner family members in the She-Hulk series, or if there's somehow like a Heroes of New York convention and Daredevil shows up and you see Luke Cage and then you see Jessica, something like that, to where we kind of just know what's going on with the Defenders because we got Daredevil, but I really like the actor that played Luke Cage, and I really like pretty much all the castings for the Defenders. Maybe Danny Rand is a little bit of a problem, but they'll figure
Mm.
that out in some way. But just trying to figure out like what is going on with that now that we have Daredevil, and it's been relatively confirmed that this is the same Daredevil from the Netflix series. So I think an hour special, like because I think like 6 hours and a Disney Plus series is going to be really dry and like not engaging enough. I think you just need an hour special of friends catching up at a bar and being like, oh yeah, hey, here's what's going on with my life, and then boom, all right, cool, let's move on to the next thing. We feel more filled in, we feel more connected with what was going on with that or whatever is or could be going on with the Hulk family. What about you though? What do you want to see connected or spotlight shined on through some of these series?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I would actually. This has already been a Disney Plus series, but I would love for them to go back to Moon Knight and basically reboot it by going to that street level thing. Having him in New York, having him be Jake Lockley, the cab driver, and sort of seeing him fight crime at that level. Like I really didn't like him, that huge giant kaiju fight at the end of the Moon Knight series. I was like, this is not Moon Knight at all. So I think there's an opportunity to kind of like, reset a character with this format. Like, it would be cool to kind of see the him in the context of New York and what that looks like. And Mr. Knight, and I don't want, like, I want more Moon Knight. I want more Oscar Isaac as Moon Knight, but I don't think I need a series or a movie um, for that. Like, I would love this kind of format, and for it to be as action packed, as brutal as it can be, and then maybe he appears in something else.
Yeah, I think it would be cool to have like a Heroes of New York kind of series. It's like maybe 4 or 5 episodes, but just each episode's just on here's what Moon Knight's
I
doing.
mean, it'd be a good special, Heroes for Hire.
Hey,
Bring
let's do it.
Luke, bring Danny and Luke. It's an hour. They're private detectives. People come to them with a case. They solve it quickly, kick some ass. Again, I feel like some of these things they've definitely stretched,
Yeah,
or they have people writing TV as a movie.
or vice
And
versa.
there's yeah, so it becomes very muddled. You know what I mean? TV should feel like TV in a lot of ways. Like, hey, it should feel episodic and have good pacing, versus like, hey, this feels like a movie that you just didn't cut down. um, but yeah, again, bringing it back to Werewolf by Night, I thought it was perfect. If I was being nitpicky, some of the humor, I was like, this is very Marvel and doesn't really belong here. But again, it has to be there to make people tune in. When people see that Marvel logo, see at the beginning, they're like, hey, like, why are they referencing the Avengers and stuff like that? Like, those are things to bring in people. And again, that's why Kevin Feige such, and the team there are such great producers. They make you care about things that most people don't care about. They bring
Yeah.
in Hulk in the third Thor movie, or do things like that to elevate certain characters. And so I think the humor and sort of that little like prologue at the beginning make people connect to it, and hopefully the streaming numbers reflect it, so we could get more of these.
Yeah. Let's get more of them. I think they're a really good format to balance out some things that are those series, some things in the full production movies. They're really good medium just to make that connection a little bit stronger and make those introductions be a little bit more firm.
Yeah.
But until next time we get a new special, bada boom.
Bada boom.
Thank you for listening to the Badaboom podcast. Keep the conversation going on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. Get in the comments on our YouTube channel and let us know what you'd like to hear next. And please subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you listen.